Ahoy, mateys, and welcome to another episode of I'm Ready, a SpongeBob SquareCast. My name is Captain Eric, and we are continuing our sail through the second season of SpongeBob SquarePants. Here we are, folks, the second episode of the second season of SpongeBob Squids Day Off, one of my favorite episodes of all time. It is the perfect pairing with Your Shoes Untied because I think the two together really set the stage for how the rest of the second season of SpongeBob would go, and honestly set a nice little peak point in the series of quality. Like, this is a new level of quality here with SpongeBob. So I have a lot of fond memories about this episode, Your Shoes Untied. I love them. I talked about Your Shoes Untied last week, how much I enjoyed the song of Loop-de-Loop. I played that the most on that SpongeBob CD, which I think came later out during season 2. I'm gonna have to look up the date on that because I clearly get my dates wrong. Now, last week on the show, we debuted a new segment, the Snail Mailbox. And there's a email address, snailmail@euphonics.com, that you guys can email me your questions or comments or my opinions on things all having to do with the show. And I definitely said, hey, if I missed something for the This Week in Nickelodeon segment, please message me. And like 80% of the emails I received were about one particular episode that I missed last week. And what's even more embarrassing is it's one of my favorite episodes of any cartoon ever. And oh boy, so we're gonna jump right into our new segment of this season, This Week in Nickelodeon, right now.
Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon.
I took my lashings, and I will explain what happened in 1 second. But first off, we're going to start off 25 years ago. On December 16th, 1995, was the Ren and Stimpy Christmas special, which is also the last episode of the show, of the Nickelodeon run of Ren and Stimpy. Which is just crazy to think about that they ended off on a Christmas episode. What an episode to go off on! But A Scooter for Yaksmas is the episode of Ren and Stimpy, the last one. Now there were 2 segments that aired on MTV, I believe, the next year, but this was the final one on Nickelodeon. Man, what a series, Ren and Stimpy. Ren and Stimpy is so vitally important to animation, so vitally important to television animation, yet just has this gray cloud over it because of obvious reasons. And if you don't know those reasons, then I can only assume you're a fringe fan of Ren and Stimpy. But Ren and Stimpy was created by a man called John Crispellucci. Now, long story short of the rise and fall of Ren and Stimpy really comes down to John. It sets on his shoulders in so many ways. John, in some ways, in certain areas, can be considered a bit of a genius. But I think that in those terms, in those ways, have to be so specific into where you could call him a genius and where that line lies. Now, certainly at this point, I wouldn't call him a genius in this modern day and age. But I believe that for those few moments in the early 90s, John was truly onto something that could have been bigger, but unfortunately couldn't because of John. I have a lot of opinions on Ren and Stimpy. As I said, I think it is one of the most important pieces of animation, specifically for television animation, because Ren and Stimpy was so madly popular at first. And unfortunately, I mean, if you go back and look at the history, I keep saying the word unfortunately because there are some unfortunate circumstances when it comes to Ren and Stimpy. But if you go back and look, they were plagued with delays, episodes not being delivered on time, John being such a perfectionist in a style that that laughed in the face of perfection, trying to get things so pitch perfect. And I will admit, when you go back and watch the first few seasons of Ren and Stimpy, you have some gold in there. You have some real gold. Gold that any other show at that time would have absolutely died for. But, man, what a waste. John Crispellucci eventually was fired by Nickelodeon, and Bob Camp became his replacement as just the kind of showrunner, the guy in charge. And the quality of Ren and Stimpy went down a little bit, if you ask most people, in those later seasons. Of course, then John was brought back. I mean, not to get all into Ren and Stimpy. We can do this later on because I'm definitely going to talk about what comes next. But Ren and Stimpy was brought back in the early 2000s with John Crispellucci on board and no restrictions on Spike TV. They were building an animation block for adults, and one of the cornerstones of this block was Ren and Stimpy with the original creator. But what you lose is you lose Billy West as Stimpy. And I'm sorry, Eric Bauza, I love you as a voice actor, but your Stimpy is just not right. And I would hope that he would agree with that too, that there's no replacing Billy West as Stimpy. But so not only is Stimpy's voice off, but without restrictions, you would think, and this is this idea of having less restrictions is better. I think people work creatively with restrictions. I'd like to see what an artist can do under guidelines, because that will show you the quality of their work. Without restrictions, yeah, in some ways, I think some people flourish, but Ren and Stimpy was not one of those ways. The reason the adult jokes worked was because they were in confines of a children's show. That's the reason why Rocco worked. Rocco's comedy was fantastic. The dirty jokes they were able to slide under the rug, those exist because you had people so hard trying to make adult jokes within a children's show. If you just make adult jokes for the sake of it, it's not as funny. So that show crashed and burned, and now we're getting a second revival of Ren and Stimpy on Comedy Central, this time seemingly with Billy West back. And I think Bob Camp has returned. I feel like this revival of Ren and Stimpy will hearken back to the original more so, instead of trying to be a gross, in-your-face adult mess of a cartoon. I think it'll be better. It'll certainly look and feel better. I don't think they'll be able to reclaim that magic. And there's a reason why Ren and Stimpy is a staple in our culture still, because there was just that instant impact, like a punch in the face. And as soon as you know it, they were gone. But yeah, Scooter for Yaksmas, they aired this a lot, even after Ren and Stimpy being gone. I wasn't the biggest fan. Certainly as an adult, I've gone back and was able to appreciate Ren and Stimpy a little bit more. But one of the big things about this episode is that the character of Stinky Wizzleteats is actually a main part of this episode. You see, boys and girls, Stinky Wizzleteats is the artist behind Happy Happy Joy Joy. In the world of Ren and Stimpy, it's one of the best episodes of the show, Stimpy's invention. And of course, the song comes from that episode. But if you've listened to that song, the beginning is sung, he says his name. This is your old pal, Stinky Wizzleteats. And in the world of Ren and Stimpy, Stinky Wizzleteats is basically a stand-in for Santa Claus. He's a bit of an alcoholic. He stays in a motel. And he made Happy Happy Joy Joy. But the Scooter for Yaksmas was actually the only time he physically fully appeared and was voiced. And he was voiced by Bob Camp. Now, originally, he was voiced by John Crispellucci. But by this time of the show, he was definitely not around. So Bob Camp took the voice duties of Stinky Wizzleteats. And that was the Ren and Stimpy Christmas, the last episode of Ren and Stimpy 25 years ago this week. That's still pretty cool. Good for them. Now, here's the mistake. And I will take my lashes with this and just hear me out. When I was doing research for last week's episode, it was the first time that I was kind of crafting what this first launch of a week in Nickelodeon would look like. And in my research, I found a very helpful tool to find some of these bigger Christmas episodes, and it's an entire Wikipedia specifically for Christmas specials. So as I'm going through and finding ones for different dates in December, Arnold's Christmas, December 14th, 1996, which would be 24 years ago. But as I'm writing this and getting this ready, I'm just quickly going through and writing everything down. Then all of a sudden, I'm getting a bunch of emails about how I'm wrong or that I missed Arnold's Christmas in This Week in Nickelodeon history. And I go back and I look at the actual date of Arnold's Christmas, and it's December 11th, 1996. So I don't know if it's going to be me, but somebody needs to go to that Christmas wiki and change the date of Arnold's Christmas because they're 3 days off. And I think they know why they made that mistake. But it seems to be tied to a few other things I'm going to mention in this segment, and we'll get to that later. But let me just talk about Arnold's Christmas for a second. December 11th, 1996, 24 years ago. This Christmas special, more than any other, has stuck with me in a way that is profound. I absolutely love, cherish, appreciate, and am grateful for this Christmas episode. Because to me, it perfectly encapsulates what the Christmas season is about. More than any other Christmas special I've ever seen in my life. As a kid, it was impactful, and as an adult, it was impactful. And here's something I'm going to add to this impact, is that in my past, I did a fair amount of working with children. I was a teacher of sorts. And on 3 different occasions in my life, 3 different Decembers came by. And the one thing when you're working with young kids, you want to show Christmas specials during Christmas, and you have a little bit more of relaxed fun, especially in that last week before Christmas. And 3 times I requested that I show the Hey Arnold Christmas special. And one of the things I will remember for the rest of my life is that out of these 3 years, 2 of the years were with older kids who were able to, from the beginning, watch this, love it, understand it, great. The one that happened in between the 2 groups of older kids was much younger, and it was in the morning before school, and I'm talking like 1st, 2nd grade level kids who have never seen Hey Arnold, because this is like 6 years ago. So Hey Arnold was not even, there was no Jungle movie or anything. And the kids, when I start the special, some are paying attention, some are not. Most of all, kids are just okay with something being on the TV and they can fool around. The second the special got to Mr. Hyun's homeland, and that you were able to see the war and the situation going on in South Vietnam, all eyes and attention was on the television. And I hope I get to tell this story to Craig Bartlett one day, because I would love to meet that man to thank him for that show and for that Christmas special. And all 3 times, I mean, it was the most striking for the younger kids, but all 3 groups of kids that I got to show that special to, the second that the war is happening in South Vietnam, all attention is on that television until the credits roll. Like, it's not like once that part's over, kids go back to like talking or doing whatever. No, like they are now invested in this story. And it's just such a beautiful story to me, told from many different angles. The whole idea of Arnold just, hey, Gerald gives him the advice, just get Mr. Hyun a tie, just get him something. And Arnold wanting to make it special. If you got to get one thing for someone, you want to make it special. You want to make it memorable because it shows how much you care. It's not about the quantity or how much you've spent. It's all about that it came from the heart. It came from the mind and it came from the heart. And for Helga to go through this whole thing throughout the episode of wanting to spend all this money on Arnold. And it ends up, not to spoil anything, but where Helga learns it's not even about what she wants. Her biggest gift for Christmas is to make Arnold happy. And if that means giving up these very rare snow boots of Nancy Spumoni, who was never pushed upon in the show. There was like this one episode where she was a big deal. But for these Nancy Spumoni snow boots, it is worth the feeling of making someone else feel good to give up something that you love yourself. It would be very reasonable for any person to be in Helga's situation, just take the boots and to just move on with your life. But that's why it's nice to see Helga. And I think this is the episode where I just fell in love with the character. And where I will tell people now, the main character of Hey Arnold is not Arnold himself. It is absolutely Helga. And it's for an episode like this. And this is just, I could gush about this episode for hours. I absolutely love it so much. But kudos to Helga. Kudos to Mr. Bailey, who on Christmas Eve having to work, be stuck in that office, and then what it seems like to be all night to find Mr. Hyun's daughter. And just such a beautiful ending. And I don't think there will ever be a time in my life, even now I'm like tearing up about it, but the music from Jim Lang, everything's so pitch perfect when Mr. Hyun turns and sees his daughter. I've cried 24 years in a row over that scene. So yeah, I know I messed up on that date and it was a simple error, but either way, I'm actually kind of glad it wasn't last week, because with the amount of stuff we had to go through last week, it was getting a little up there. So I had to re-record that segment actually. But yeah, 24 years ago, Arnold's Christmas. So this is the reason why I think they made this mistake, is because in my research, I was also finding that two specials aired the same night on December 14th, 1996. And the other two were Oh Christmas Pete, the Adventures of Pete and Pete Christmas episode, and Merry Christmas Keenan. So I guess there was a special snick on December 14th, 1996 that aired all these Christmas specials. And so I think Hey Arnold's Christmas just got lumped in, even though it aired 3 days earlier. But I don't have a lot of memories of the Adventures of Pete and Pete episode. I love the Adventures of Pete and Pete. I love so much about it. But especially the third season, it's harder to get to since apparently it's on DVD. Apparently, and this is from the Pete's themselves, I would definitely check out the podcast, The Adventures of Mike and Danny. But I met them live. They did a live show up here in Connecticut, and I met them, and I'm sure it's one of my profile pictures on social media is my picture with those two. So I hopefully they remember me. I hope I had somewhat of an impact on them. I tried to be as least annoying as possible with all of my questions. But while they were there that night, they actually mentioned that Paramount, or whoever does the discs for Nickelodeon, which I think it's Paramount Home Media, they have the season 3 set done and printed, but apparently is just sitting in a warehouse, just hostage. Like, it's done, it could be shipped, it could go out tomorrow, but they're just sitting on it, and it's been like that for years. So I have no idea what's going on. But yeah, it's much harder to get the third season of Pete and Pete. Keenan and Kel, though, Merry Christmas Keenan, I do remember, and it's actually along the same lines of Arnold's Christmas. It's one of my favorite Keenan and Kel episodes, and it's very much the same end result as Arnold. I think Arnold has a little bit more at stake than what's going on, because I'll give you a little bit of a TDRL of Merry Christmas Keenan, but apparently all year Keenan has been saving up to buy this very specific mountain bike, and as a Christmas present to himself, he wants to get it, and to finish, the rest of the money, he ends up getting a job as a Santa, as a department store Santa. During this time, he finds out that this little boy also wants a bike, but not for himself. He wants a bike for his sister. And his family are actually, I don't remember how it comes out in the episode, but I know that his family is a little bit underprivileged, poor, if you will. So they're not really able to, I think, afford a bike. And what Keenan ends up doing is seeing this little boy not want something for himself and want something for his sister. And Keenan's heart grows, and he gets the mountain bike and breaks into the kid's house to bring them the bike. And there's the moment that he gets caught, because I remember he gets caught and the mom kind of realizes what's going on, and it's just a sweet ending to an episode. And Keenan gives this little girl this really nice mountain bike. And it's just kind of hitting me now that both Arnold and Keenan and Kel had these Christmas specials come out 24 years ago, like within the same week, obviously, but and just how similar that whole sentiment of it's not really about what you get, it's about the smile you can put on others' faces. The hope being that it goes around full circle and somebody does that for you. Somebody goes out of their way to put a smile on your face. So anyway, that was all the Christmas specials for that year. But 12 years ago this week, this is the last item here, our iCarly had iChristmas, which doesn't stick out to me as a Christmas special I remember, but I do really like iCarly. It was probably the last Nickelodeon show I watched, like, with new episodes on television, because very shortly after that kind of finishing up, I was very close to moving out, and after I left my parents, I just didn't have cable anymore. I just always went by internet. So new shows on Nickelodeon, it's a lot tougher for me to follow. So iCarly might have been my swan song, that or Victorious. But with this news of iCarly coming back, it's actually kind of exciting. But I don't know if anyone else noticed, but Jeanette and McCurdy was nowhere to be found in that announcement. And how do you bring iCarly back with just Carly, Freddie, and Spencer? And in what way? I mean, I don't know if any plot details have leaked or anything. I haven't really looked into it. It was just kind of a headline I saw, and it was exciting to see. But the only thing I can think of as far as a continuation of the series, I don't see it being just like, oh, Carly moving back in with Spencer at the apartment building and she needs to reboot iCarly. I think the one thing that makes sense is that iCarly itself is becoming a bigger deal, and there's an actual studio set, and it's more about putting on the show and the shenanigans that go on there. And maybe there's some home life skits or whatnot, but that's where I see Freddie being brought back as kind of the camera operator again, but on a bigger set. And Spencer maybe being brought in to help out with stuff. That's just my guess, given that everybody's a little older, and it would just seem weird to kind of go back and do the same thing. And how does a revival of that look? But with no Jeanette McCurdy, that just seems off. It's like when they rebooted That's So Raven. They did Raven's Home, and Orlando Brown, even though for understandable reasons was not brought back, but like there was just this massive hole missing that you just can't fill. And even I think Kyle Massey didn't even show up for the show. I mean, maybe he did now for one episode. I know that there was one episode with Rondell Sheridan, but yeah, I don't know how I feel with a Samless iCarly. I wonder if maybe there was just still some bad blood or burnt bridges from the whole Sam and Cat debacle. It didn't even seem like it was an issue with Jeanette. It seemed like it was more of an issue with Ariana. That whole thing was just a mess, and then everything that happened with Schneider after that. Yeah, that's a can of worms we are not opening up today, because today is Squids Day Off, and we're going to get to the episode right after this. Magic Conj, will I ever get to meet Tom Kenny?
Maybe someday.
Oh, so you're saying there's a chance. Okay. Should I tell fans of the show how they can support us?
Yes.
Goofy Goobers, supporting the show is shockingly easier than catching a blue jellyfish. Right from our anchor page, anchor.fm/SpongePod, You can find links to all of our social media and a support button if you happen to have a few extra clams. Also follow us on twitch.tv/SpongeBob Podcast, where it's not only the official home to our sister show, Video Bob Game Pants, it's also where I stream live drawings of various Nickelodeon characters and host the opportunity for commissions and giveaways. Lastly, the official merchandise store is now open at redbubble.com/people/SpongePod, where various designs will be uploaded inspired by our show, including our official logo, which is now available on a multitude of products like t-shirts, stickers, duvet covers, and even a shower curtain. This is a podcast by a fan, for fans, and will always be fan-driven. Any way you see fit on supporting our show is much appreciated. Thank you, and enjoy.
2,000 years later.
And we're back. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. This episode is Squids Day Off, one of my favorite episodes of SpongeBob in its entirety. And now that I'm saying that, I still have to do my season 1 breakdown, and I'll probably schedule that at some point in January. I'm looking to get back into streaming once a week, starting in January, probably for an hour or two every week, but just something goofy, nothing serious. SpongeBob games, Nickelodeon games, whatever you guys want. And that'll be a nice little weekly hangout. But that'll be in January. Squids Day Off, in the terms of all of SpongeBob, would not only make my top 10, would probably make my top 5. Now, as I'm thinking that, not being as sure, but I'm pretty positive, it would definitely make the top 5. But as a boss, and I've done this before, where while you're working, you might have to go out, and not necessarily on your break, but for anything outside of that, that would be considered your break. You know, if you want to run over to a store and grab something, but you're working. I've been in Squidward's situation before, not necessarily leaving an employee to do something they wouldn't know how to do. I mean, he teaches or shows off SpongeBob about the cash register, what seems to be the first time since SpongeBob has been at this establishment. I wouldn't do that to an employee, and especially just leave one there alone, because I don't know what Squidward was really thinking. I mean, if there happened to have been a lunch rush that day, I'm not denying that SpongeBob isn't responsible enough, but he was being really irresponsible in this case, because even though he lucked out to just be like, okay, you do this, I'm going home, the Krusty Krab seems to be at least a 2-man operation, because before SpongeBob gets there, it seems to just be Mr. Krabs and Squidward. Now I know that there was previous fry cooks and whatnot. I'm talking like first episode when you're introduced to the characters. It just seems to be those two working there. It is. So for Squidward to just up and leave, like, I kind of understand it, but it would have just been all in all better for him to tell SpongeBob he's going to do some errands and then close the Krusty Krab. Like, that way SpongeBob, thinks he's waiting for customers and no one's getting in. Like, that would have been the best case scenario. Or just tell SpongeBob, oh, Mr. Krabs is going to the hospital. We're closing up. We're not opening today. But literally anytime I have to leave my store for anything that's not my break, like even if it's something work related, like, I got to run to the bank, that's an errand. So anytime I leave, I'm always thinking of Squidward and SpongeBob in this episode. So it happens pretty frequently. But if you want to watch along with me, you can of course get your device, whatever you like to watch SpongeBob on, and put in the episode. Of course, there is no opening theme, so we're starting now. Boom! Right at the beginning of the title card there. Directed by Walt Dorn and Paul Tibbett. Written by Walt Dorn, Paul Tibbett, and what was that guy's name? Oh man, and I don't want to. Meriwether Williams. Jim Schumann is the storyboard artist. Animation is Andrew Overtom. And I believe this is his first episode here, Andrew, for an animation director. I want to actually get that information right, so I'll look at it in a second. And of course, creative Derek Dryman. My favorite name to read because it's just so perfect for SpongeBob. It works in so many ways. I, of course, luckily have only ever worked on one job that has a bell for service. I don't know. Let me just tell you, in that one job, it was fairly annoying because you could literally be right there, and I'd have customers that if I wasn't looking at them in the eyes as they walked up to the counter, they would ring the bell. Like, it definitely was a power move on their part. Like, just to get your attention. Like, my body would be right in front of the cash register if I happened to be talking to the person, right in the back. Like, they would ring the bell just to make sure I look at them. But here we have the a look into the world of Mr. Krabs. Now, he was a penny pincher from the beginning, but as I've mentioned either in the last episode of season 1 or last week's episode, over time, Mr. Krabs just becomes way, way more cheap. And here we have a situation where he's literally hurting himself to get this dime out of the drain. And I honestly would love to hear his reasons for not letting go of a dime. Now, there's always been a level of physical comedy in this show, but this is a very long-running gag that goes on, and everything that falls off of that shelf is just so funny. It's one of those things that physical comedy will always be hilarious if done right. No matter how old you are, how young you are, how many times you've seen it, if it could be done right, it's one of the perfect pieces of comedy that is universal because it's physical. There's no language barriers. So Mr. Krabs getting hit in the head with a pot, glass, frying pan, lunchbox, treasure chest, anchor, buoy, deep sea diver, and dime would be funny no matter what language you speak. But everything... I love the amount of freak out Squidward goes through this episode. I can only think of one time I've left a store and felt anxious about leaving it. And it was definitely at some point this year. I'm not going to go into details, but let me tell you that, of course, the second I felt this way, the thought of Squidward running back to the store kept going through my mind, because as I was out and I was doing important work related things, but as I was out getting some stuff, I had that this whole episode was just playing in my head the entire time. How does he not recognize that the sign, for the amount of times he goes back to the Krusty Krab, you think on one of those occasions he would see the closed sign? Which is just crazy that SpongeBob just randomly finds it at the end, and all those times Squidward running by the entrance just doesn't catch it. But here's another thing. If this is a day where the Krusty Krab, I find it doubtful if you've worked at any store. Well, if anybody listening out there has experience working in a store, you should know that if you have an opening time, depending on where you work, you have people waiting out of the store for you to open. And I can imagine, look, fast food, I did Dunkin' Donuts. I have 3 years of Dunkin' Donuts under my belt. Let me tell you, when we would open that store, there would be somebody right at that first minute, right at the drive-thru. And sometimes waiting outside the door right for when we unlock so they can walk in. Imagine not opening up right when you're expected to. Those people would definitely say something. So it's kind of kudos to the citizens of Bikini Bottom, who seem to be very attentive to notice the closed sign and not even walk up and check. They just seem to accept it, because you think at least one guy would have walked up banging on the door, or would have walked in to see if it was actually closed or not, and would have walked in. But no one did. No one did, because they must have read the sign. That doesn't happen. Let me tell you, no one reads signs. I work at a store right now where signage on the front is the most important part, because it answers literally half the questions people are going to ask coming in, and they don't read. I could plaster 10 of the same sign on a door, and someone will walk right by it without giving it a second thought. So very, very kudos to the crowd in Bikini Bottom there. But that would freak me out if I was thinking about a place burning up and right after a fire truck runs by with its lights on. I don't blame Squidward for this one. But the fact that he gets mad that the place is not on fire kind of funny. It is. I it's one of those just little subtle things with Squidward I just didn't get when I first watched this, but then over repeat viewings, it's like, man, I love that guy gets angry that the place is not on fire. Like, worst case scenario is completely averted, but I'm still a grouch. And if he would really, instead of just trying to take the whole day off, if he would limit himself to an hour, if he would just say to himself, look, I'm going to stay away for an hour, I think he would be able to enjoy himself for that hour, even if it was 2 or 3. But the fact that he's forcing himself to do a whole day is really something. These are the rare moments, though, at Squidward where you actually get a look at his conscience a little bit, because even though Squidward is very rough and tough and angry and grumpy, he does seemingly have a baseline conscience. And this is one of them. He's not able to take a hooky day. He, like, feels weird about it. And it's like, you know what, man? Just stay at work if you're that anxious. But have you ever annoyed somebody like SpongeBob does, saying, are you finished with those errands? Because, man, after this episode aired, I feel bad for my poor mother who probably heard that for a couple months constantly. Are you finished with those errands? Hey, are you finished with those errands? Errands. The ways SpongeBob mentions to make change for $1 are 4 quarters, 10 dimes, 20 nickels, 100 pennies, 1 quarter, 3 dimes, 7 nickels, and 10 pennies. Here's a little piece of trivia for you. There are 237 other different ways to make change for $1 not mentioned. And there's 288 different ways if you're including the rare $half. I have not seen that in circulation in so long. Once in a while, you get a weirdo who hands you a $half, or they give you one of those Sacagawea gold dollar coins, which I associate only with the road to El Dorado, because I hope other people remember that in copies of that VHS, you had a chance to win a dollar coin. And when that came out on VHS, I was at a Stop and Shop, and they had a bunch of they had like a rack out that had like 20 of these VHSs, and I just looked in all of them and got like $8 or $9 or something like that. It was crazy. It was like 8 or 9 of those coins. But yeah, like anytime I see those coins, I just think of the road to El Dorado. I know it was bad of me. I'm not proud of it. If I could take it back, I would. But you know, I was a young kid, and there was gold, and I did what I had to do to get that gold. SpongeBob is really good at making change. Let's just think about that. Squidward's little squid transformation here. Definitely one of the creepiest things I have ever seen. just the look of it and the extended head. And of course, Squidward here running back to the Krusty Krab completely naked. One thing I read about this episode, and I knew it was coming up, but I didn't know which episode it was. This is the last episode to feature an M shape of Patrick's eyebrows instead of the Z. So for those watching the first season, Patrick had very it looked like he had, I don't want to say hairy, but the way that the eyebrows looked, they were kind of like this M shape, and it looked like kind of 2 little pieces of hair. This is the last episode to feature it, and starting with Something Smells, Patrick just went to the now known Z style of eyebrow, which I definitely think fits him a lot better than the M shape, and I'm glad they changed that. But apparently, in the episode Big Pink Loser, he still has the M shape, which now thinking about it, I'm like, all right, now I'm remembering a little bit where they went back to that. But yeah, very quickly in season 2, they switched it over. I love also how you hear the zipper sound when SpongeBob takes off his pants, even though they're like slip-ons. And this whole end part, as an adult, can my fellow adults be with me here that you have had days where you feel like Squidward when his nose pops off of his face and you have air just deflating out of you? Man, when you grow older, you get to really understand Squidward in such a good way. But that was Squids Day Off. Like I said, I have such a love for this episode. I have personal situations that remind me of this episode. It's so good. When you're on that level and you're in charge and you do something that Squidward did or leave for a little bit, like, don't tell me this episode doesn't pop in your head for any of the SpongeBob fans out there. Yeah, this was Andrew Overtomb's first episode as an animation director, so what a fantastic job. What a great episode. Absolutely love it. Definitely has some questions here and there, but man, this is classic SpongeBob. This is, I've mentioned it before. Find that one episode you would show a non-SpongeBob fan, and man, there's so many from season 2 and 3 I would show, and this is one of them because it is just relatable for other adults. I think they would find the humor in that, and Squidward is a great character to get behind, especially if you're an adult, because you're gonna find more in common with him than you're gonna find with SpongeBob or Patrick or even Mr. Krabs. So yeah, this is something I would absolutely show, even like my mother, who tolerated SpongeBob but may have not ever sat down and watched an episode. This would be a thought in there. And that was Squids Days Squids Days Off. Nope, it was just a single day and barely a day at that. But let's dig into the snail mail box and see what everyone has written me this week. All right, as previously mentioned, I did receive all of your emails having to do with missing Arnolds Christmas. A few colorful emails there. There was actually a good laugh because after the first one, I'm just going, oh man, I can't believe I forgot that, and I received those lashings. But we got a few messages this week. This one, Steve from Massachusetts. All right, our northern brothers. Hey Eric, do you have a favorite Nickelodeon movie? I've always enjoyed Good Burger myself. What are your thoughts on that one? Well, if we're talking about the Nickelodeon, well, I'm just going to be real here. The fact that you mentioned Good Burger, I'm going to take that as the Nickelodeon theatrical films. My favorite is the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. But if I had to go with like a non-Nicktoon one, I would probably say Good Burger. Just like you had mentioned it. I mean, I grew up with Good Burger. I saw it in theaters. I watched all that, and I absolutely adore that movie. And there's a reason why it's just kind of stayed the test of time in people's thoughts, because it is just one of those weird, wacky comedies that exist, and I'm glad it exists. I love everything about Good Burger. I'm glad that that's your it seems like that's going to be your favorite pick there. But for me, like, Good Burger is definitely up there as a big live action one. I also enjoy Harriet the Spy a bit. And I think over time it's certainly lost its luster. Certainly the way I viewed it as a kid, as an adult, you kind of look at it differently. Not in a bad way. It's just when you go back and watch certain movies you enjoyed as a kid, you look at them through a more critical lens. You're now an adult. You're now paying attention to different things than you did as a kid. So certain movies, like, you can think about enjoying them as a kid, then you watch them as an adult. That's Harriet the Spy, but I do think it still holds up very well. I like Jim Carrey's Lemony Snicket's movie. Although I completely, before this, I forgot it was even a Nickelodeon movie. I just thought it was a Paramount thing. And then when I went to go look at the list, just to double check to see if there would be anything I missed on there, I saw it and I'm like, oh yeah, that is a Nickelodeon movie. Huh. Well, they did such a good job in the Netflix show, I completely forgot about it. So yeah, my favorite SpongeBob SquarePants movie, and I really love Good Burger. If you haven't seen Good Burger, I think it's still available on Netflix. I would definitely just take some time out of your day and watch it, and just enjoy that movie. Everything with Keenan and Kel, absolutely love them. Logan from Florida. Hey, Eric, I recently found your show from the SpongeBob Movie Rehydrated's Twitter page, and I've loved your show so far. If you had to make another show similar to Squarecast about another Nicktoon, what would you choose? Do you also have a non-Nickelodeon show you would do as well? Logan, I would absolutely now. Alexis and I have joked about this on the episode that I had her on about an Invader Zim podcast in a very similar light to this going through each episode. But if I had to pick another show, I would probably pick Hey Arnold and go through episode to episode, through the movie, to the Jungle Movie. I think I would really enjoy that because Arnold as a show ran for about 100 episodes. So, yeah, you're getting a couple hundred episodes out of that you can do. I don't think Zim would be very finite. You can certainly talk about the 2 seasons of the show, the movie. I think it would be important to delve into the comic series because that helped influence the movie a lot and kind of has kept Zim alive through the years. Without those, though, the only other one that comes to mind that I think I would enjoy very much doing would be for the Fairly Odd Parents. The only thing that scares me, though, is I can deal with the season with Poof, and I can deal with the season with Sparky, but I season 10 really scares me as a fan of that show. I was just kind of it's actually weird because I was explaining to somebody the other day about I was answering some Nickelodeon themed question, and they asked why I didn't pick the Fairly Odd Parents, and I said, look, like everything before Poof is grade A, and everything with Poof and Sparky is like a B, and with Chloe, it's just an F. It has to be even ungraded. Not that there's a new female character, but I never minded new characters if they don't upset the core of the show. And I've explained this to many friends. And it's kind of the reason why I've given Kimmy as a character more flack than Dill, because Dill is a prop. Dill is like Spike. He can be used in episodes, but he doesn't have to be there. Kimmy came in and moved right into the core of the show. Now, new characters can certainly plant themselves and become staples. It is certainly a possibility, but Kimmy didn't, like, even though she upset the flow, she didn't upset the core, because the core of the show are babies having adventures. Doesn't say specifically it has to be Tommy, Chucky, Phil, and Lil, because there have been episodes where it's just Tommy and Chucky. There have been episodes that are centered more around Phil and Lil, and there have been episodes around Angelica. It's about babies having adventures. The core of Fairly Odd Parents is Timmy, Cosmo, and Wanda. That is your core. That is your heart. And it would be one thing to add Chloe as a character and make her either a friend or a nemesis. I think she should have had her own Fairly Godparent, kind of in the same way they did with Remy, but something more permanent. Oh, this girl in my class has a Fairly Godparent. That's something exciting. Maybe she overdoes or overturns a Timmy wish, like Timmy wishes for Crocker to have a piranha in his pants, and then she wishes it away. Like, that might upset the flow, but it doesn't upset the core, because at the core, it is still Timmy, Cosmo, and Wanda at the end of the day. But with season 10, they pushed Chloe right into the core and messed with that, and I just hate that the show ended on that note. Even though I have also read from some people that they don't consider season 10 the end, and that they would rather consider the 3 live action movies as more of a finale, and I'm fine with that too. But yeah, so Fairly Odd Parents. So Hey Arnold, Fairly Odd Parents, Invader Zim. Those would be my 3 Nicktoons if I ever had to do this again. Which look, this show has a finite amount of episodes too. There's 10 seasons of this show, 11 seasons, there's 3 movies, a handful of specials, but that's it. At some point, I may catch up with new episodes, and there might have to be a wait point for this show to continue. So I've definitely thought about other Nicktoons to kind of be able to tackle in those times where I might be coming up to a moment where like, I'm going to be closing in, but that's not going to happen for a while. We just started season 2. Season 3 is not going to be for another year from now or so. So I'm not worried about needing another show. But yeah, expect a Hey Arnold show out of me at some point down the road. But that's going to be this week for the Squarecast. Now, if you want to email me your questions, please email me at snailmail@ufonics.com. UFONYX.com. Whatever you'd like about the show, comments, concerns, opinions, but your questions are nice. I love getting questions like that kind of can sit with me from the moment I see them until the moment I record, and I can change the answer or whatnot. I really enjoy those things, and I'd like to see more of you guys a part of the show. So thank you for everything. We will see you here next week. Everybody out there, stay safe. Don't forget to wear a mask, and I hope to see you next time. Magic Conj, will I ever get to meet Tom Kenny?
Maybe someday.
Oh, so you're saying there's a chance. Okay. Should I tell fans of the show how they can support us?
Yes.
Goofy Goobers, supporting the show is shockingly easier than catching a blue jellyfish. Right from our Anchor page, anchor.fm/SpongePod, you can find links to all of our social media and a support button if you happen to have a few extra clams. Also follow us on twitch.tv/SpongeBobPodcast, where it's not only the official home to our sister show, Video Bob Game Pants, it's also where I stream live drawings of various Nickelodeon characters and host the opportunity for commissions and giveaways. Lastly, the official merchandise store is now open at redbubble.com/people/SpongePod, where various designs will be uploaded inspired by our show, including our official logo, which is now available on a multitude of products like t-shirts, stickers, duvet covers, and even a shower curtain. This is a podcast by a fan, for fans, and will always be fan-driven. Any way you see fit on supporting our show is much appreciated. Thank you, and enjoy.